The world is perfect. To be able to sustain life on it is impossible as we've only proven that life only exists on our planet, and there are no others like it. What makes our world perfect is the systems that are in place, known as the natural cycles that occur in the background that support and give life. Our group will be focusing on the land biogeochemical cycle, epigenetics, and phosphorus cycle that deals with the flow, transformation, and transportation of phosphorus in inorganic and organic materials, soil, and water. The phosphorus cycle is important because phosphorus is needed for the growth and maintenance of cells and tissues needed for the transformation of DNA and RNA. This cycle plays a major part in our world systems as DNA and RNA are the building blocks of life. However, it has its own set of problems and challenges that affect the cycle. Anthropogenics, for one, that deals with human interaction and invasive species. These are ways how the equilibrium of land biogeochemical cycles are challenged.
Basically, when we talk about biogeochemical cycles, it is a sequence and flow of chemicals and other components toward biotic and abiotic force. And this is important in our environment because they recycle and store materials as well as regulate important substances through physical features. They are vital to life itself. All living and non-living objects in ecosystems are linked by these cycles, ensuring ecosystems vitality. Now, let us describe the process, in which it will start from an erected rocks. Let us take the example of mountains, which will break down into what we call the soil due to the appearance of rain from the atmosphere. From there is a process of assimilation of the phosphorus through the roots of plants in order to create components such as ATP for its availability to eat by plants, human beings, or even animals. Then, if human beings or animals die, we go to what we call the decomposition, in which we could possibly return the gain of phosphorus from our body into the water that works out the sediments and become phosphate rocks again that causes mountains to lift out like from the start. As I explained the process, if this cycle is essential in our ecosystem, let us curious ourselves. What if it stops? What will happen in our environment along with human beings and animals? Well, if there are no use of phosphorus to plants, basically, there would be no way to produce oxygen as well as produce food. And without the production of oxygen, all kinds of life, including humans, animals, would even eventually go extinct.
Epigenetics is the study of how your DNA associates itself with what we call epigenetic tags. These tags regulate if a particular gene will be turned off or on based on several factors. We'll get to that later. Firstly, we must define gene expression. Gene expression is a process where genes are expressed by undergoing two processes, transcription and translation. There are several ways epigenetics will affect a particular protein. Firstly, through DNA methylation. Methyl groups or CHD attach themselves to the DNA, preventing transcription. And from what we discussed earlier, transcription is necessary for gene expression, thus rendering a particular gene inactive. But of course, there is a process called demethylation, wherein these methyl groups are taken out of the DNA and thus activating transcription. And the last processes are called histone methylation and acetylation. Histones are a structure of protein that DNA is wrapped around. Histone methylation is when methyl groups attach themselves to histones to prevent transcription, and thus stopping gene expression. Histone acetylation is when the histones become looser, making transcription possible and thus gene expression. While histone deacetylation does the opposite. It makes it more compact, which may limit transcription. Epigenetics is also influenced by the environment a particular being lives in. Suppose an environment lacks a necessary mineral such as phosphorus. Living beings that inhabit that area may have certain genes turned off or on in response to the deficiency of phosphorus. Furthermore, epigenetics is also being used by scientists to study the growth of living beings and diseases. An example of epigenetics is cats. Ever wonder why cats are born with different colors? This is due to epigenetic tags turning off and on particular traits that would otherwise make a cat different in color from its siblings.
I'm about to present how anthropogenic phosphorus cycle works. The anthropogenic phosphorus cycle is characterized by higher loss by diffusion, which leads in the transfer of phosphorus from the lithosphere to the hydrosphere, resulting in eutrophication. Around 27 million tons of phosphorus are being sprayed to agricultural fields each year, with only 10 to 11% absorbed by humans and the remainder dispersed. As a result, it is critical to recover phosphorus in a more efficient and sustainable manner. One interesting way to phosphorus accumulation is to use phosphate accumulating organisms, which ingest and store a greater quantity of phosphorus than the conventional organisms. In addition, human activities have significantly impacted the phosphorus cycle, mostly to create fertilizer to sustain a rising human population, with the majority of the increased mining and use of phosphorus occurring after the mid-20th century. This extra phosphorus has a considerable influence on the function of the Earth system, largely through eutrophication of freshwater lakes, but it may also contribute to the establishment of an anoxic zone in the ocean.
Invasive species are those of which harm not only the natural resources of man, but as well as the ecosystem within an area. Invasive species can be introduced to new areas unintentionally. To be specific, they can be transported through a ship's ballast, a propeller of a small boat, in a crate, a shipping pallet, or intentionally by using them to control a specific species. These invasive species can harm wildlife. If an invasive species was introduced to an area, they may or may not have any natural predators. Therefore, they can breed safely and quickly. The natural wildlife of that area would not have the defensive capabilities to go against the invasive species. Specifically, these invasive species may threaten the wildlife around them by outcompeting the native fauna on food, hunting the young native animals, and carrying diseases. They can also directly break the balance of diversity within a habitat, which will eventually impact a larger area. Now, the question here is, are humans invasive species?
Humans have a significant impact on the phosphorus cycle due to a variety of human activities, such as the use of fertilizer, the distribution of food products, and artificial eutrophication. Thus, the human activities serve to harm aquatic ecosystems whenever excess amounts of phosphorus are leached into the water, but to be able to save our environment. People should take care of their actions. There will be consequences on everything we do. Our society represents a big role into the phosphorus cycle and also in every part of it.